Hello,
Perfect.
and that was too quick. That was too quick. I got too excited.
Too
I got too
excited.
excited. That is going to start low. Hello, and welcome to the Michigan and Trumbull podcast. I'm Alex Freeman, joined as always by Luke Jaconis. Luke, All Star break. You took a mental break from the team. How
I
you
took like
doing?
a sabbatical. Oh, thank you. I'm good. Thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. The team. It was a really interesting going into the All Star break because I think if you did not tell me that the Guardians would be one of the best teams in baseball at the All Star break, the Royals would be having an incredible season, and that the Tigers were 3 games under 500 at the All Star break, if you had told me that earlier in the year, I'd be like, okay.
Yeah.
I would have liked that number to be more like at 500, but
Mm-hmm.
3 games under 500 from where this team has been, I will take it. That being said, it's a really disappointing 3 games under 500.
Yeah, the Tigers' trajectory this first half of the season is quite simple, in my opinion. They played really well for the first 2 weeks. They played like
Mm-hmm.
shit for 2 months, and they played really well the last 2 weeks, which gets them to a mid-tier, mediocre 500-ish team. This team, credit where credit is due. I'll always give them their praise when I feel it's warranted. The last 2 weeks of the season, played some really good baseball, taking, I believe it was 3 of 4 from Cleveland, taking 2 of 3 from the Dodgers, ending the season on back-to-back ending the first half, on back-to-back walk-offs against a good Dodgers team. They swept Cincinnati in Cincinnati. So there definitely is some props to be given for how they wrapped up the first half. Because looking at that schedule, especially ending the year against, ending the first half against Cleveland and the Dodgers, I was like, this thing is about to get ugly. And they
Mm-hmm.
played 7 games against those two teams, and I think going 4-3, I'm sorry, no, 5-2, definitely nothing to sneeze at. So 3 games under as we head into the second half. I don't really know how to feel personally because I will admit I've kind of checked out the last couple weeks. At first, I did it because I was like, I just don't want to watch this anymore. Also, just my personal life with work is getting busier, working a lot more evenings, so I don't have the luxury to just sit on the couch and watch 3 hours of Tigers baseball anymore like I once did. But as they started winning, I was kind of like, oh, well, maybe I'm the problem. Someone called Taylor Swift. It's me. Hi, I'm the problem. It's me. And then as they kept winning and winning and winning, and I was watching less and less and less, I was like, I'm not going to jinx this. So I check in from time to time. Um, I was pretty flabbergasted in that game 2 against the Dodgers to see them come back and win that, scoring 5 in the ninth and 2
Yep.
in the 10th to win the whole thing was pretty remarkable. Colt Keith with the big 2-out homer in the ninth. Urshela touches them all in the 10th. Colt Keith really has come into his own. I think that's one. There are definitely are positives to talk about this first half. I know I joke, and when it gets bad, it gets bleak sometimes. This obviously is not as bad as 2018, 2019. Um, you know, or 2022 even for that matter. But uh, there are some positives. Riley Green is an all-star. We have Tarek Skubal, who was an all-star. Both showed up and showed out in their minimal all-star appearances at the game. American League gets the win, so good stuff there. So obviously there is a couple pieces, as we always like to refer, that are kind of being like, all right, Tarek Skubal, reliable. Riley Green, shown these reliable. Colt Keith, although he scuffled the first month and a half, 2 months of the season, has proven over these last few weeks and pretty much a good chunk through mid-June till now that he seems to be pretty reliable. The power is there. Um, but then there's just still a lot of questions with this team.
Yep.
The Javi Baez contract is an issue. What the hell's going on with Spencer Torkelson? Still don't have a third baseman. What's the outfield looking like? Who's catching for this team down the road? I will say this, again, kind of credit where credit is due. Carson Kelly, who just kind of showed up here mysteriously in the second half of last season, has really kind of been okay to solid. He's no Johnny Bench, no Mike Piazza, no Ivan Pudge Rodriguez, but getting the job done and providing a kind of somewhat surprising offensive spark from time to time. So yeah, it's my first half reaction is the word.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a very fair reaction to a 47-50 first half of the season. And I think that for me, like the last couple of weeks, what they have kind of answered in a way that we've sort of known this answer for a while is that, like, yes, we have an okay core. There are young guys who can come into their own, who seem to be moving along the correct trajectory. Guys like Riley Green continuing along the correct trajectory has shown that this season, as we had some like injury question mark coming into this season. Could he really be the guy? Was an all-star. I think we can I feel pretty solid saying, like, yeah, he's one of the guys. Mm-hmm. Colt Keith playing into that contract extension really nicely as the season has gone on. Those two guys, great. Javi continues to be a problem. Torque is hitting under 250 in AAA right now. And so there's which kind of leads into the trade deadline discussion, because I was reading, I think it was in The Athletic earlier today, just kind of what is the coming out of the All-Star break, looking to the trade deadline look like for the Detroit Tigers. And one of the questions is Cy Young favorite Tarek Skubal. What do you do there? Because obviously there are plenty of teams that are desperate for starting pitching that are contending. He would be an instant upgrade for a lot of teams, and you could theoretically get quite a haul for him. That being said, if you are intending to build a contender in the next few years, you don't want to lose Tarek Skubal at his prime right now. And I think that for me, you have to make a lot of moves in the offseason, but more so since seeing what the Royals have been able to do this season, is that the Tigers do have enough on the roster that if they go out and have an offseason like the Royals had last season, they could then be instant competitors. If they're not going to do that, and God forbid, we're going to shut it down again and say, all right, let's get a haul of top prospects to make a run at it 3 years from now, then I guess that's the move I want to see them make. But to me, I hope the decision and the conversation between Scott Harris and Chris Ilitch right now is, Chris, you have to open the checkbook this winter, and we got to go big, because we don't have the pieces to compete right now. We have the secondary pieces to compete right now, but we don't have the primary pieces.
Yeah, really well said. I've wavered a lot on the whole Tarek Skubal. Right now, if you're on social media, that's the main thing that's consuming Tigers Twitter is, should they trade Skubal? Should they not trade Skubal? And I'm 50-50 on it. Everything you said about, if you're trying to next year or the year after, if you think you're kind of approaching the part of your window opening that we're going to get some offensive reinforcements, we're going to keep relying on guys like Riley Green, Colt Keith, Wensiel Perez. We're going to keep relying on young arms like Reese Olson, Kiter Montero, Casey Mize, hopefully he comes back healthy. And if you can go out and sign a couple more pitchers and a bat or two, you're absolutely right. You should not be trading away an arm like Tarek Skubal. The sad part of it is really, and I was kind of thinking about it today, and everyone on Tigers Twitter is pretty much right. You trade away Skubal, you better get a haul in return.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, Al Avila is very different than Chris Ilitch, but I just feel like there has not been one big move that I've seen in probably the last 10 years as a Tigers fan from a general manager or a president standpoint where they made a big blockbuster move and it worked. I went and revisited the JD Martinez trade today. They essentially shipped JD Martinez out of town for 3 guys who I think work part-time at Culver's and have never been heard from since. And again, I get it, different regimes, different leaderships. But if I can just take everyone back till last year around this time, and it's just, I'm sorry, I have a hard time of letting things go. Scott Harris bungled the Eduardo Rodriguez trade. That was not even 12 months ago, folks. So, and I get it. He did the opt-out at the last second. He was well within his rights. Whatever, fine. But the fact remains that still just is insane to me. If that deal fell through, there was nothing lined up for the silver medal, the bronze medal. It was an all or nothing to the Dodgers. That was it. So I guess what I'm getting at is I'm not convinced in Scott Harris to pull off that move and get the proper pieces in return. So I hate to sound like such a pessimist lately, but I'll believe it when I see it. I will believe it when I see it. When I see Scott Harris go out there and make consecutive, solid move after move after move after move, I don't need him to hit home runs every single time, but something that's solid, something that's good, something that, and to me, I'm going to put the caveat on that, that's not going out there and digging through the waiver wire for garbage and maybe striking gold or maybe striking a little bit of luck with a guy like an Andy Ibanez or Tyler Holton. That just, to me, that's it. He's made, in my opinion, that I can think of 2 big trades in his time here. The acquiring of Nick Maton and Matt Vierling in the 2022 offseason going into 23, and the trade they did at the very beginning of last offseason getting Mark Canha to Detroit. Both of those moves, Nick Maton isn't a Tiger anymore, neither is Donnie Sands, but Matt Vierling, Mark Canha, they've been solid. They're not gonna be the guys you're riding into the promised land for the next 5-10 years, but they've been fine. I think Vierling's probably produced more than Canha has. But those 2 moves, though, even though I think that they're fine, there's nothing in them that gives me solace. There's nothing in them that gives me comfort. So I just don't have any faith right now in Scott Harris to make the proper deal, to get the proper prospects or arms or bats back in return. And I have zero faith or zero promise in Chris Ilitch ever opening up his wallet. And if he does choose to open up his wallet, all he does is sign a guy like Javier Baez, who has been, not to be an ass, but a cancer to this team now for 4 seasons. So, 3 seasons. But, yeah, so, and then I think, too, real quick, it's just a bummer. It's a bummer that here we are, once again, coming out of the heels of the All-Star break, and we're, like, talking about trading. We're selling. Jack Flaherty is as good as gone. Tarek Skubal very well may be gone if they get the proper deal. And
it's interesting with Flaherty. It's interesting with Jack Flaherty because I did not realize this until reading the piece that he is qualifying offer eligible. And so I think that moved me from 100% Jack Flaherty is gone at the deadline to 90% Jack Flaherty's gone at the deadline. Because it is not, well, he just walked and we got nothing.
Yeah.
Anymore. It's not the all or nothing that I was thinking of it as. That being said, are they going to want to pay him $20 million? Is somebody going to pay enough that they get a round A compensatory pick? Or either way, they would get something. Now, that being said, draft track record being what it is, and again, different guy, Scott Harris. We haven't seen his picks pan out yet. I hope he's gone. I hope we get something more than a competitive balance round B.
Yeah.
Compensatory pick for Jack Flaherty, or that maybe they just pay him $20 million next year. Not my money. I'll spend the one thing money.
The one thing that's being floated around right now is if they go the Skubal route, they're looking at a team like the Dodgers or Baltimore because both of those teams, especially Baltimore, is just rich with minor league talent, high-level, big-name prospects. I've seen a couple scenarios where they ship Skubal and Flaherty to Baltimore and they rake in like 5 to 6 big-name prospects. The thing is, though, and the one name that's being floated around a lot, if they trade Tarek Skubal to Baltimore, Tigers getting Jackson Holiday back on the return. And this is all where it all turns into NFL draft season. Will they, coulda, woulda, shoulda, who knows? We'll find out. But my instinct tells me, and I could be wrong, I've been wrong about a lot of things with this team, a lot. My instinct tells me Tarek Skubal is not going to go anywhere. Jack Flaherty, I do think, will get traded. I don't know offensively who they could move because Riley Green is not tradable. He's off limits. Colt Keith, I think, is off limits as well.
Yep.
Everybody else that's up at the major league level right now, I definitely think could get moved. I think the question is, though, who takes a flyer on them? Who's looking after, to get a Matt Vierling or Jake Rogers, maybe a Carson Kelly, who I kind of talked about. If someone's looking kind of for that backup kind of mind, I don't know. I don't really know.
Carson Kelly's interesting because I do think we'll likely see Dylan Dingler debut
in the second half,
in the second half of the season, and Jake is, especially if you're a team that has decided we're definitely not going to win it. We're certainly not going to win the division. I think we can make that decision. We're probably not going to get into a wild card position, barring a really, really hot start and some teams having the really, really slow start coming out of the All-Star break. So Jake Rogers is going to be fine to get you through the rest of the year as your starting catcher. And you'll have Dylan Dingler up, and you want to create opportunity for him to get experience. And so I think moving Carson Kelly could make a lot of sense.
Yeah, look, I just real quick looking at, and this is just kind of the basic stat line for Carson Kelly, hitting 247 and 166 at-bats, 7 home runs, 29 RBIs, OPS of 736, which honestly, fine. Again, you're not going to get the Orioles farm system for just Carson Kelly. I can tell you that much, but he's a guy. Another guy too, maybe you see that gets dealt. Andy Ibanez, only 132 at bats this season because he doesn't play every day, and he also had the injury early on. But hitting 288, 4 home runs, 21 RBIs, 768. And if you're looking for someone to come in against a left-hander in late innings and get you a base hit, Andy Ibanez is your guy. Guy mashes left-handed pitching. A Mark Canha, I don't really foresee him. I know he's also been battling injuries. I mean, he's sitting 228, 6 homers, 34 ribbies, 675 OPS. Gio Urshela has kind of turned it around a little bit lately, but I don't see, unless it's some sort of package thing, where or if there is a move for a Carson Kelly or a Gio Urshela, it's very minuscule. You're getting some low A, maybe high A at the highest, reliever that no one's ever heard of before. So we'll see. I don't know what's going to happen with that, but it is kind of a bummer though that just once again this is where we're at. And it just feels like it's a never-ending cycle. The worst part is this too. They're only 3 games under 500. You're exactly correct. They could start this second half with a nice, 8-game win streak or whatever, and definitely kind of put them in a position at the end of the month to at least be in the conversation. But they're just so far out of the American League Central at this point. I think they're like 12 to 14 games out or something like that.
They're 12 games back from the Central, and they're 7 games back from the wild card just because the AL's been beating up on the NL so much.
Right. So if anything, I can't even saying this, but if the Tigers want to try to find a way to salvage this season and make a postseason run, the easiest road travel as of now will be the wild card, assuming Cleveland doesn't completely just fall apart and crap all over themselves, which I would love to see it. I would. But
and like there's definitely opportunity in the world where Cleveland falls apart a little bit, especially kind of at the top of coming out of the All-Star break here. Then you start to look at, okay, the Tigers have the Blue Jays this weekend, who
hopefully they win some games there.
Not having a good year, the Blue Jays. Be interesting to kind of see what happens with them at the trade deadline as well. Then they play Cleveland for 4, and they obviously just went 3-1 against Cleveland in 4. Then they have the Twins, who also sitting above them in the standings, and then they have Cleveland again for 2. So I mean, there is a scenario where the Detroit Tigers are hot coming out of the All-Star break, And suddenly those numbers we just mentioned, 12 games back and 7 games back, are now 7 games back from the division and 2 or 3 games back from the wild card. And we're starting to have a slightly different conversation about the trade deadline and how to handle it and what you want to get. I still think at that moment, if you could move Jack Flaherty for a bat, you probably want to do that. But it's a tougher call.
Yeah, and I hate to even play the hypothetical game because as we said before we started recording, hope will drive you crazy.
Yeah.
And I almost wish they wouldn't have had a good end to the first half, because then we could just be like, done, selling, that's it. They're 14 games under 500, not happening, pack it up, see you in 2025. But of course, in typical Tiger fashion, they just had to give us just a little, a nugget of hope to be like, hey guys, we're not that bad. Remember how we played at the beginning of April? We're doing it again right now. Come back over, join us on the dark side. The water is just fine. And like suckers were like, oh, maybe it's going to happen. But, caution, everyone caution yourselves. Don't put the cart before the horse. But I want to expand upon one thing that you were just saying. We kind of just did that little schedule breakdown for July. And I agree with you. And this is a big if they can start catching fire and taking some series from Cleveland, Minnesota, Cleveland, Kansas City, yeah, then you're exactly right. The AL Central is wide open. They're much more than kind of put back into the conversation for the wild card. But those are a lot of big ifs, and those are a lot of games 100%. They must win. And it's not one of those things, too, where it's like, all right, well, they can split a series with Cleveland. They can maybe lose 2 of 3 to Minnesota as long as they win the next 2 with you have to go in and win series. The time for splitting series, the time for, if it's a 3-game, just being okay with taking 1 and not getting swept, dead and done. You got to go in there with the mindset of we need to win this series, if not sweep, because our backs are against the wall. And the reason why their backs are against the wall is because just kind of expand upon what you said a moment ago. Yep, they start the second half against Toronto. Toronto has not been playing well this year. Then it's 4 in Cleveland, 3 in Minnesota. 3 against Minnesota, 2 against Cleveland, 4 against Cleveland. Then they go out west to Seattle, who's playing good baseball. The Giants, who are kind of that mid-tier 500 team.
Kansas City there instead of Cleveland.
Where does it say Kansas City?
They play 2 against Cleveland and then 4 against Kansas City to start August.
Yeah. 3 home against Minnesota, 2 against Cleveland home, 4 and then Kansas City also. No, they really just are jamming the AL Central lineup from late July to early August.
I mean, you have to win 5 straight series there. Then start worrying about what do we got to do when we go out west.
And keep in mind, those series, the Cleveland, the Minnesota, and then those last 2 against Cleveland at home, you're in the thick of trade deadline season where you don't know who's coming and going. Jack Flaherty could be gone by then. Tarek Skubal could be gone by then. Maybe some of the guys from the bullpen could be gone. We don't know. We don't know. But then even looking into August, like I said, they're out west, Seattle and San Francisco. Then they're back home against Seattle, then against the Yankees, and then gets a little bit easier, but not really, because they're playing the Cubs in Chicago, and the Cubs are playing better baseball as of late-ish. White Sox suck, so hopefully you get some wins there. And then, of course, the LA Angels, who they just can never seem to beat. They never can beat the Angels, whether it's in Anaheim, whether it's in Detroit. They never beat the Angels. The Angels and the Athletics. You might look at those and be like, all right, guys, we got some wins coming. Not me. I look at those as losses. The Tigers never beat the A's. They never beat the Angels. It's just fact. It's just fact. And then, September kind of goes on from there. It gets a little bit easier, a little bit harder. But the point being, they've got a very hard schedule in the second half. So you almost have to kind of start weighing your options here, kind of thinking about all the risks and the statistics of you actually making a deep run and turning it around. And do they ride the momentum of the last week and a half of the first half into the second half and really kind of make some headway, make some moves, make an impact? And I just don't know. My heart tells me no. I'm going to be not going to be the optimist on this. I'm going to say no. I think they're going to meet their match, but I hope I'm wrong.
Because also the best way to catch a team that you're chasing, and right now they are chasing Cleveland, Minnesota, and Kansas City to try and win the division, is to beat that team. You can't rely on other teams to beat that team while you are beating other teams. So these are the last 6 games against Cleveland.
Yeah.
These are their last games against Minnesota in July.
That's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
That is crazy. Well, I guess I didn't realize that. Yeah, I mean, that's the
You
problem right
you
there.
have a few more against Kansas City later in the year.
Yeah. That's it. That's it. You're exactly right, though. Even if let's play the hypothetical, positive hypothetical for a second. Even if you go and sweep Cleveland these last 6 games of the year, you still got to find a way to make up 6 more games. Give or take a couple, depending, how the Twins and Kansas City would play during those games against Cleveland. But at this point, unfortunately, the Tigers, a lot of their own power is out of their hands in terms of the division. The wild card, like I said, might actually be the road that's a little bit easier to navigate. Only problem with the wild card is you're fighting against 5 to 6 different teams right now. And even teams that are ahead of you, and then there's even a couple teams right below you that all it's going to take is for Texas to go on a run, and they're ahead of us. Toronto, I think is going to be big-time sellers in a couple weeks. So I think Toronto is kind of, but Tampa's kind of in a similar boat as we are, kind of that mid-500 team. Boston is playing actually surprisingly pretty good baseball this season, to a lot of people's surprise. I know, at least for me. So it's going to be hard. Then, of course, you got the Yankees, and of course, you got the O's, and they're battling it out, and not going to get any easier there. Seattle, Houston, and then we've got teams of our own in Central. So my advice to the Tigers would be win and win soon, because if you don't, they're going to be selling anyway at the deadline. But if you want to even try to retain any of these guys, I think Flaherty's gone. I personally think Jack Flaherty's gone. And if Jack Flaherty is gone, and I don't know the next time we'll get an episode in, if it'll be pre-deadline or post-deadline, and if this is the final episode we can record when Flaherty is still a Tiger, hats off to Jack Flaherty. And for the second year in a row, you have to give credit, once again, as we say almost every episode, to this pitching staff, and the pitching staff, but also the pitching coaches, Chris Fetter, Robin Lund, Juan Nieves. What these guys are doing. Last year they turned Michael Lorenzen into an all-star. Jack Flaherty damn near could have been an all-star this year too, in my opinion. He's pitched really, really well and has been an incredibly solid arm for the Tigers. He really has. I know he's been hurt a little bit banged up here and there, but overall been pretty darn solid. I really wish we could rewind the clocks to 6 or 7 months ago, and offer Jack Flaherty that 2-year deal, as opposed to can't pitch Maeda, who is no longer even in the starting rotation. He's now hanging out in the bullpen, which, to his credit, in that matinee game against the Dodgers on Sunday, he did, I think, go out and pitch like 3 scoreless innings. So maybe something good to come there, but I'm not holding my breath. So yeah, we'll see. It's going to be definitely interesting. Before we kind of hop off here real quick, though, there was one other big thing that took place this past weekend. Not only was it the celebrity softball game, which is a huge event.
Indeed.
Not only was it the home run derby, congratulations to Teoscar Hernandez, but on top of that, before any of that occurred, it was the draft. And the Tigers, the Detroit Tigers, with the 11th pick overall, took shortstop Bryce Rayner out of Harvard Westlake High School. The pick is valued at $5.7 million, and according to MLB.com, he has not yet agreed to terms. So, with their first pick in the draft this season, the Detroit Tigers took a shortstop. Now, I'm going to say this real quick, and then I'll kick it to you. I don't think this kid's debuting in Detroit next season, or maybe the season after that. So when people are kind of throwing around these big hypotheticals of like, trade Skubal to the O's and get Jackson Holliday, I think this move here kind of poo-poos that right out the bat. Yeah, Bryce Rayner is not going to be here next season, but Jackson Holliday is a guy who scuffled early on in his major league career, has not found his footing yet. He could learn a thing or two from his buddy Spencer Torkelson. I'm sure they probably have talks all the time. But yeah, I don't see that the Bryce Rayner pick in the draft really kind of put the kibosh on it for me in terms of the Tigers making some big package deal for Skubal. Unless they're moving away from a shortstop and just a bunch of other guys, offensive guys and maybe some pitchers. But yeah, we got a potential shortstop of the future. Hope it works out.
Hopefully we'll be arriving as soon as the Javi contract is off the books.
That would be wonderful. The on paper, there is some young offensive talent in this minor league system that is okay to be excited about. You got now Bryce Rayner, Max Clark, Jace Young. There are some big names that the Tigers have recently drafted that I don't blame people if they get excited. Whenever I'm feeling kind of down and crappy on this team and I think we're never going to win, I do look at the I do look at the pipeline and I'm like, damn, they do have some guys coming up. If they can just contribute, we'd be set. But then I think of a guy like Spencer Torkelson and I'm like, dang, this is, let me ask you this question. I think we're going to see Torkelson again sometime in the second half. When do you think we see him?
Post deadline, I think. I mostly just because he's not mashing it at AAA, and
no.
I think that's what he's going to need to be doing before they bring him back up, because otherwise, why'd you send him down if he wasn't going to take the time to get the swing right, get the swing better, get to a position where now he needs to be seeing major league pitching as opposed to AAA pitching.
If I were AJ Hinch, Scott Harris, Chris Ilitch, etc., I would make it very clear to Spencer Torkelson. I would also call him up after the trade deadline, assuming then probably you've gotten away some pieces and you've given away some pieces and you're kind of at this point like, yeah, we're just in cruise control till September when this thing wraps up. And in those 2 months, I would say, Spencer, this is it. You got these 2 months to show us something. You don't even have to be the Spencer Torkelson of last year where you mashed 31 home runs. We just need to see some signage of life, because if not, we're moving on. You've had 3 years in the major leagues. His success has wavered, to say the least. He is, for the second time in 3 years, had to be sent down to AAA midseason to get things figured out. He is a former 1-1. It is time to start acting like it. And again, he doesn't need to perform like that big power hitting 1-1 for those entire 2 months, but you just got to see some sign of progress, some sign of hope for the future. Because if not, I'm saying that's it. And then in this offseason, I'm looking to bring in some sort of first baseman talent. And here's the thing, and I've said this in the past too, real quick. I feel like for Spencer Torkelson, competition may help him. I feel like the last 3 years, his name has already been etched into the opening day lineup at first base. Bring in another first baseman that's going to give him a run for his money. That's going to say, yeah, dude, this just isn't your job to start with. You got to earn it. You got to earn your playing time. And I think you give him the months of August and September, see what he's capable of, see if he's going to show up at all, and then you kind of make the assessment from there. But I think if he comes up in those 2 months and if he just fails terribly, I think, in my opinion, it's more than time to put the nail in the coffin and start looking for other replacements at first base. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. It's going to be an interesting couple months. So
I agree, Luke. All right. Well,
all right, buddy.
We'll talk soon.
Talk soon.